We are the Navy Blues. We are the old dark Navy Blues. We're the team that never lets you down. We're the only team old Carlton knows. With all the champions they like to send up.
My name's Clinton. I'm from Melbourne. I was born in 1975. Grew up in a Carlton, pretty staunch Carlton family. My mother and grandmother were both massive Carlton people. And I had no choice in the matter. I remember actually I had a Fitzroy doll when I was like 5 or 6 years old. I got given it to me for my birthday, and I don't know, it only lasted for a couple of weeks. It went missing, got kidnapped, and I got replaced with a Carlton doll. So from then I've just been a massive Carlton fan, had no choice in the matter, and yeah, I've seen some great times in the early 80s through to 1995 premiership, but sadly the last 30 odd years we haven't seen much success. But yeah, nonetheless, even though living in Queensland now for the last 25 years, I've nearly jumped onto the Lions bandwagon, but stayed true and still with the Blues. I've got 2 brothers and a sister, and we grew up, my mother was a single mother, so we grew up, she done it tough, and footy was just a massive escape for me, really. I looked forward every weekend to watching the footy or going to the footy down at Princess Park or to the MCG. It was a massive part of our life, and yeah, it's followed me. It's been with me for I'm 50 now, so it's been with me for my entire life, from being a player, from juniors to seniors, to becoming a coach, and then to also becoming a club president for my last club that I was at. So it's given me a lot in life, and yeah, I'm just so grateful for footy being a part, for being in my life, and for the Carlton Footy Club to, I guess, make me just really be passionate for football. I played a little bit at school, played junior football, but for the first couple of years we were undefeated, and back in those days you used to have, they had finals and it was all full contact, even in under 10. So, and we only lost one game, won 2 premierships, so it felt wasn't challenging. So I stopped for a couple of years, and but yeah, I missed it, and then joined back in and just played football in Melbourne for a couple of years until I moved up to Queensland in 1997, and then started playing up here. Yeah, I was down there living with my mother, and my father was living in Brisbane, and my brothers had moved up to work with him. And it was just a working opportunity, so came and worked in the family business. We had a butcher shop, worked in that for probably close to 10 years. And then, as I said before, I just had enough of cutting up meat, and made friends with some Air Force guys, and I just thought, it's now or never. I don't want to regret this when I get to 50 and reflect back and think, what if I had not jumped over and made that decision to join. And that was just basically I guess I was a little bit jealous of the lifestyle they were leading. They always come back with stories saying they've been travelling here, travelling there, and it sounded exciting. So I joined pretty late. I joined when I was 31, and I remember when I had done the Airfield Defence Guard basic course. It was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It was mentally, physically, emotionally challenging. I think we started with 55 guys, and after 15 weeks we had about 24 of us that graduated. So just that day on graduation day, I was just super proud, feeling with my family there, watching, and and being one of the guys that made it through, because it was extremely challenging. I don't know what it's like now, but back in my day it was really hard. Yeah, funny story. I'm pretty short. Back in the early 80s, I had an interest of joining the army, and I don't know if you remember, but they used to have height restrictions. And so it was I was always short, so it was kind of that's not going to be possible. And I don't know what year it changed, but they got rid of those height restrictions, and then shorties could come and can join the military, which was a thumbs up. But it wasn't until I think it was around 2005 I met some guys that I was playing football with that were in the Air Force, and I just fell in love with their stories and the lifestyle they were leading. So I joined in 2007 with the Air Force as an Airfield Defence Guard. And had a great career, mainly as a reservist, but I've done a little bit of full-time service, and had some great opportunities to deploy. Went to Afghanistan, and for 6 months, which was an eye-opening experience. And then, yeah, was fortunate that, with technology, we could keep an eye on football over there. Like we had Foxtel over there, so we could watch Carlton games on when I wasn't on shift. And I just basically served as an FL defence guard. Yeah. Yeah, at Amberley, I joined. Our recruits was at in Elizabeth. I was on the last course to go through Elizabeth. That was in 2007. So we had that was a big deal. It was a massive parade after that, and then came to Amberley. It was based up here. Done all my training there. And I had to go back to Elizabeth for 6 months. Posted back down there. Came back. Then I went on a deployment with the Navy up at Darwin for 6 months on Op Resolute. Working with the Navy guys was pretty cool. Got a lot of money, like for all these different incidentals and stuff. That was the best part. But and then came back and got posted back to Amberley and finished pretty much my career there. For me, it's family. I remember. Oh geez, I went to loads of games, but I think it was more because sadly my mother and my grandmother have passed. They're no longer here, so I carry all those memories. You don't really appreciate it until you lose people in your life, and sadly as you get older that happens more often. But I just remember the days sitting there listening to the radio, because a lot of the time we had the radio. There was not much footy on TV back in those days, so as a little kid just sitting there listening on the radio and just riding the bumps and the waves together, and seeing my mum screaming and yelling and grabbing a pillow or whatever and swearing, just the highs and lows of footy in those little moments I'll never forget. And I remember one day I was in a little small room with my grandmother and my mum, and we're listening to it on the wireless, as my nanny used to say, and Carlton were winning, and I came into the room, and then I remember I was probably only about 8 years old, and then we started losing. And then I went out of the room again, and then Carlton started to win again. And so I came back in the room, and then they started to lose. And then they kicked me out. They said, "Get out, you're giving us bad luck." And I never forget that. That was a true story. And they made me sit outside the door, and I had to listen through the door to the rest of the game, and we won. And then I just remember that's something that back then I didn't feel too good, but now I reflect back on it and I go, wow, I'll never forget that. That was just such a great memory, and a moment that I remember them coming out and being so happy and picking me up, and so I think the best thing about football, especially from Carlton, is just the connection I have with family, and I've passed it on to my kids, and and going to obviously to the games and seeing them play in some grand final victories, and I'm pretty lucky as a Carlton supporter. There's people who are in their 20s and 30s that haven't experienced that, so I think you take it for granted when you follow a big club and they've had so much success in the past, but now they're struggling and not getting that success. It's you take it for granted. So I'm lucky I've got those memories. Yeah, I remember moving up. My mum, obviously, I moved up, and my mother still lived in Melbourne, and I moved up in '97, and I was looking for a club to play for. And back then, I had there wasn't a lot of clubs. Footy wasn't as big up here, and I think there was Sherwood, who were Collingwood, Yeronga, who were Essendon, and Cooper, who were Carlton. And I was living in Forest Lake, and I was really wanting to go and play for Cooperoo to wear the navy blue and a Carlton emblem, but they were further away, and so the closest clubs were Sherwood or Yeronga. And I rang my mum and I said, "Look, I found a couple of clubs, but one's Collingwood colours and one's Essendon colours." She goes, "Well, if you go to the Collingwood colours club, I'm going to disown you, so you can't go there." So I ended up going to play at Yeronga for 3 years, just basically off that conversation. So I know she was just joking, but I was like, no, I don't want to. I can't wear the black and white either. And then, went to Sherwood, and then I went out to Ipswich for 20 years. Didn't mean to go that long, but I ended up being there for 20 years, 10 years as a player. Then, as I said before, 5 years or so as a coach, and then 5 years as the president. And then, it's what 20 years is enough. I needed to change. And then I went to Cooperoo for 2 years into the State League program with Cooperoo. And then, funny enough, I ended up at Sherwood, the Collingwood colours, as a coach. So, it was full circle. And at the moment, I'm just had a bit of time off. But I've taken 6 months off, but I'm missing it. So I've just put some EIOs out to see if I can find another club to join. So I've got 2 children. I've got a daughter I had my daughter quite young. I was 18 when she was born. Yeah, it was a big eye-opener. I had to grow up pretty quickly. So, yeah, that was challenging, but I wouldn't change anything. She's turned out to be an amazing human being. She went to uni, became a school teacher, got married, and has now got 3 children. So I've got 3 amazing grandchildren who've got a father that's a big rugby league Broncos fan. So I'm trying to, get the AFL in there somehow, a sneaky little, Carlton bib or something here and there. So trying to convert them to AFL, but, which is going to be very challenging. And I've got a son as well who's almost 23 and he's just about to finish studying his electrical engineering degree. So I'm super proud and lucky to have 2 amazing kids. At the moment, I'm just taking a bit of time off. I've just gone back to studying. I'm actually studying psychology. As I said, becoming a dad at 18, I had to give up on higher education. So I had to go and get a job and provide for my young family. But I just found myself the last couple of years in a situation where I can make it happen. It's not going to hurt me if I do it, So I thought, again, by joining the military, I just had that mindset, well, I don't want to turn 70 years old and regret not having a crack. So going to uni as a mature age student has been extremely challenging, but they are a great university at University of Southern Queensland, and they have like a veteran cohort. So that has been really, really helpful because there's other people from the who are veterans who have taken on study as middle-aged students or as mature students, and that was being able to connect with them has been really helpful. If I didn't have that, then it would be probably a bit more struggling. You feel a bit more isolated because you'd look around and everyone's like half your age, if not younger. To have people like that to connect with has been really great. So before I started to study, I didn't know about the pathways or the entry levels to through the RSL or anything. But for me, being a veteran, there's been a lot of guys within the veteran community who sadly, struggle with their mental health, or and they're no longer here, or they try and although they may attempt suicide or something like that with their struggles with their mental health. And for me, being very lucky as a veteran, we have access to psychologists and psychiatrists. So it was we get advice to see them at least once or twice a year, just to stay on track and just make sure everything's going all right. And for myself personally, I took advantage of that, and I spoke to some psychiatrists and psychologists over the last few years and got to know them quite well. And they've been amazing for me, don't get me wrong, they've been great. But none of them have had the experience, like none of them are veterans themselves. They know their stuff, don't get me wrong, but, and I was just talking to one I've got to be good mates with, and I just said, look, do you think maybe this would be something I could do, if I learned how to become a psychologist or a counsellor in the mental health space? And he was like, yeah, we'd love to have people like you who have got lived experience, as veterans, to work in that space. So that's my goal, is to, hopefully finish my degree and then, get into that area there where I can be there for other veterans who may be struggling, or before they struggle. I mean, that's the most important part, is from what I've learned, is to people, to connect with people before they struggle, before the straw breaks the camel's back, so to speak. And so I think that's where my next journey is with my career, is to work in that space. And I'm a volunteer with the Green Slopes RSL, so every Friday or every second Friday I go to the Green Slopes Hospital and visit veterans who are in there. Most of these guys are in their 70s or 80s or even in their 90s, and just to go in there and say g'day, have a chat, spend 15 minutes or sometimes an hour if they're up to it, and just let them talk, and don't talk anything about why they're in hospital. Firstly, we make sure they're okay, then they're doing all right, but it's just about talking about their life. And some of these guys, once you get them going, they can't shut up. They just, because they don't get that opportunity, they just get to talk to doctors and nurses all day, because some of these guys sadly are they were in there for a week, months, and yeah, just to see someone who's got a shared experience, you know, as from the veteran community, to go in there and say g'day and just have a yarn with them. And it's great for me as well. It just makes me feel, you know, you just get humbled and you just feel really grateful, especially when you're talking to the guys that have been around, you know, since World War II. There's still some of those guys around. There's not many, but you know, they were young guys back then, whether they were kids going through that crisis or through the war, or if they served. And yeah, it's just listening to their stories, you know, it's just, yeah, it's great to give back, you know, because, yeah. I've even asked my supervisors if I can, you know, start taking notes and making a journal of my conversations and who I'm talking to, so these stories can be published or released, or if it's on social media or in an article or anywhere really, in a newsletter. But so we're going through that process now to see if we can get that approved, because I think, you know, that story of just that one-on-one conversation just means so much. You're just getting someone's a short little history of someone and their childhood, their career, everything, and then what led them to where they to the point they're at. And then when you walk out the room, that's it. There's no one else who's going to get that. So for me, I think it's just super important, because yeah, just we've got to, I think, honour the past, and you know, but so much I think we take for granted. You know, I'm not just speaking because I'm a veteran, but the sacrifice people make. It's not just what the positions they put themselves in danger, whatever. It's, you know, the time away from your freedom, from your life, like 6 to 12 months away from your family, from your homeland, and you know, and I think, you know, it's just paying a little bit back to them to share their life and share their story, because yeah, for me it means a lot, and I can't put it into words. It just, you know, I get a lot out of, and it sounds greedy and selfish. I'm there. When I volunteer, I'm there for them, but I get a lot out of it. You know, out of entertainment or satisfaction. I always leave those sessions as, you know, with a bit of joy, because I just experienced what I experienced with someone who's just lived in a different generation and different culture, and yeah, and it's just, yeah, it's fascinating. My time with the Navy when I was helping them out was, I was there for 6 months and probably only worked for 2.5 months, and the rest of the time was just like drinking or just sleeping. It was, they have a great lifestyle. They work super hard and they are away a lot at sea. But I was pretty fortunate. I only went to sea for probably 60-something days, and the rest of the time, as I said, it was just in the bars, just drinking and having fun and just socialising and getting paid to do it. I don't know if that should be saying that on TV or camera, but yeah. But I remember the first day at sea. I hadn't been out in the open ocean before, and I was super confident. You know, young guy and new environment, just excited and confident. And I got onto the ship, and they said, oh, okay, you can come up to the bridge and, you know, say g'day to the captain and hang out up there. So I was up there for quite a few hours, and then, you know, they probably about, I don't know, 10 o'clock at night, went to bed, and then woke up the next day at 5 a.m. and I was like, whoa, I don't feel the best. And then walked out, I got dressed and walked out into these little hallways and got down to the little, I think it was called the galley, where the guys sit down and have breakfast, and they're all sitting down having breakfast, and everyone's looking at me. I just walked in the door and everyone just looked up and staring at me, and I'm like, I don't feel really good at all. And they go, you right, mate? You look green. And I'm like, yeah, I don't. And I just remember grabbing my hat and then just spewing in my hat, and seasickness was just, it was horrible. And then I remember just running out, and for 3 days I was just out basically every morning, just going to sit outside on the deck for 3 days straight till I got my sea legs, because I was pretty weak with that. It was horrendous. I was just having super dupers for 3 days because I couldn't keep nothing down. And then apparently they were giving me a lot of crap about it, because it was only sea state 1, and you know, and there's 5 sea states, I think, you know, with 5 being the worst, and it was still only sea state 1. So, but yeah, that was probably, you know, funny for everybody else, but not funny for me. But yeah. But I guess with Afghanistan, I got some great memories. You know, we weren't really challenged. I wasn't involved in any, you know, full-on conflict or anything like that. We did get, you know, a bit hairy a few times. We got attacked a few times with IDF, which is in direct fire. But apart from that, it was a relatively safe deployment compared to a lot of other guys who've gone and served over there. But just the great memories of the little group that we had, my section. You know, we were a combination of some older veteran, mature guys with some new recruits, like, you know, guys who had just joined. So it was a massively, you know, in balance. And yeah, I just remember the bond we had together and spending a lot of time, like, you know, spent, you know, a room half the size of this, tiny little room, 8 guys crammed into one room for you know, 6 months. You know, you're eating together, you're basically showering together, you're working together, you're around each other non-stop. And I think I didn't appreciate the bond and the brotherhood until I got home. Like, you get home and a couple of weeks after you're home, you're just like, man, I just miss that environment, I miss that camaraderie, I miss that the brotherhood. And haven't seen a lot of those guys for quite a few years now. Some guys for probably almost 10 years, but every time we cross paths, you're giving each other a hug because you just got that, you know, that connection and that bond that, for us. So that's probably the most special thing from my time in the services, people that you're really, really connected with, and, you know, you've got that forever, you know, like I see mates from football or from work, from other jobs, and you'll shake hands or whatever, but these guys, you know, you're giving each other a hug, and yeah, it's just, you can't put it into words, like, you know, it's special. I think you've asked me that 10, 20 years ago, it'd be all about me, you know, remember me as this, remember me as that, but I think now, with having life experience and things that I've been through, becoming a father so young, and, you know, losing my mother when she was only 60 going, that was pretty tough, and then being deployed and away from your kids, and then, as I said, I'm only a little guy, and I've always been, I guess, not super confident in myself, and always been afraid to do things and to try things, but I always just did it, and then ended up accomplishing a lot, like joining the Air Force, you know, and when I was joined and I was on my course, I was the smallest and the oldest guy, and I just, you know, people were doubting me, and the instructors were saying, you're not going to last, you're too little, you're too old, and then I achieved that, and then going to university at nearly 50 years old, I think it's just, I want to just leave to my kids and my grandkids, it's just, you know, don't be afraid, like, have a crack, and if you don't succeed, at least you can lay down and say, look, I had a crack at it, don't have any regrets. And another thing is, like, I think the biggest quote I always give to my kids is, like, if you're not happy, then you got to change things. Like, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Like, it's simple words that just drive so much to me, and I just want to pass on. It's just like, just don't be afraid to change. If you're not happy with something, then you've got to change it, because nothing is going to come and do it for you. No one's going to come and save you. No one is going to take you, you know, out of your position now. You are the only one that can. If you want to do that, then go and have a crack at it. And, you know, if you don't get what you want, at least you're going to get experience. And so, yeah, I think it's more about what I've done in terms of, and what I'm trying to do and what I'll do in the future, that will be my legacy, rather than, you know, telling them to do it, if that makes sense. Just, you know, I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but it's just about, don't be afraid, just live your life, and don't waste it, because, you know, time waits for no one, you know, time goes past so quickly. And the other thing is, I know, is just, people won't worry about, you know, what's the most precious thing in life. For me, it's time. Time, you can't get it back. The best thing you can ever give someone is time, is just to be there for them and just make yourself available. And I've learned that, you know, the hard way. Like, as I said, losing my mum, like, I just always reflect, you know, I wish I had given her more time if I didn't know she was going to be gone so quickly or so young, you know. So I think that's the biggest thing I can pass on, is just, don't waste time. You know, use your time wisely, and I don't know if that's enough.